He held her hand through the last hour. She did not ask him to. He did not ask permission. His large hand simply found hers and stayed. When Daniel came, small, furious, and impossibly loud, the midwife placed him in Richard's arms almost immediately. A reflex, not a decision. Richard looked down at his son. The boardroom, the contracts, the 2 billion naira, Gloria's prayers, Emeka's temper, the apartment, the second phone, the guilt that had lived in his chest for 18 months. All of it fell completely silent. There was only this small, angry, perfect face, this child who had done nothing except arrive, and in arriving, had rearranged everything. Richard did not cry. He was not a man who cried easily, but his lips pressed together, and his jaw worked silently, and Vivian, watching him from the bed, turned her face toward the window, so he would not see her weeping for an entirely different reason. She had not expected him to look at the baby that way. She had protected herself against many things. She had not protected herself against that. He named him Daniel Oluwaseun Adeyemi, in the privacy of that clinic room. Oluwaseun meaning God has done this, and the name felt like both a prayer and a confession. He put his own name on the certificate. It was the most honest thing he had done in 2 years. It was also the beginning of the end. The company driver's name was Tunde. Tunde had worked for Adeyemi Construction for 11 years. He had driven Richard to 200 site visits, 3 international trips, and 1 secret apartment on Akin Olugbade Street, more times than he could count. Tunde was discreet. Tunde understood his position. But Tunde also had a cousin, a mechanic, whose workshop was 2 streets from Emeka's apartment in Surulere. It took one conversation, one evening, one moment of ordinary human weakness, a man who knew too much and held it too long, talking to someone he trusted. Emeka found out on a Wednesday. He did not call first. That was the thing about Emeka. He had never learned to process pain before acting on it. He felt, and then he moved, and the movement was always too fast and too large for the space it happened in. He drove to his father's office on a Wednesday afternoon, in a dark blue Honda Accord, parked badly, walked past the receptionist without stopping, ignored the PA who rose from her desk saying, "Sir, he is in a meeting," and walked through the glass boardroom door. There were 6 people in that meeting. 2 were international partners from a construction firm in Dubai. Emeka did not see any of them. He saw his father. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be talked about in whispers at Adeyemi Construction for years afterward. Emeka's voice, when he started, was not a shout. It was something quieter and more frightening. A low, shaking, controlled fury that the people in the room would later describe as the sound of something breaking that was not meant to break. "You have a child," he said. "You have a child with your secretary, a son, while my mother was on her knees, praying for you every single night." Richard stood up slowly from the head of the boardroom table. His face was composed in the way that only a man with everything to lose can compose a face. Completely still on the outside, while everything collapses within. "Emeka, not here." "Where then?" The shout came from somewhere deeper than anger. It came from the place in a child, no matter how grown, where the father is still supposed to be the safest person in the world. The Dubai partners quietly gathered their documents. Someone's water glass fell and shattered on the floor. Richard did not move. Emeka swept a stack of files off the boardroom table with one arm, turned over a chair, and walked out. The glass door cracked on his way through. Gloria found out that same evening, not from Richard. He had driven home with every intention of telling her himself, had rehearsed 3 different versions of the conversation on the Lekki Expressway, had walked through his own front door with his mouth already forming the first sentence, and found Emeka sitting in the living room, waiting, with a printed copy of Daniel's birth certificate on the coffee table. Gloria's face, when she read it, did not crumble immediately. That was what Richard would remember for the rest of his life. Not the tears that came later, not the words, but the 5 seconds before all of it, when his wife of 26 years simply read a document, set it down with both hands, and looked at him. Just looked at him, as if she was seeing him for the first time, as if she was seeing him for the last time. Both, simultaneously. Then she pressed one hand over her mouth, and her legs gave way, and Emeka caught his mother before she reached the floor. and looked at his father over her shoulder with eyes that said everything that would be said between them for the next several months.